So, we have a new trailer for the new Sopranos prequel film, The Many Saints of Newark, brought to us by Sopranos creator David Chase and directed by one of the show's original directors, Alan Taylor, telling the story of the formative years of future mob boss Tony Soprano and his relationship with his mentor Dickie Moltisanti, who would father Tony's protege in The Sopranos, Christopher. The first trailer gave us a peek at the look of the film, the basic setup of the story, and brief looks at our favourite characters from the show being played by younger actors, the most intriguing casting of which is of course Michael Gandolfini as Tony Soprano, the role which made his father a household name. I'm not going to do a very detailed analysis of the trailer in this video, breaking down individual shots and discussing detailed theories and whatnot. I mean, we're less than a month away from the film's release anyway, so what's the point? Don't want to get Sopranos fatigue, and I'm sure most of us Sopranos fans want to go into the film knowing as less about the movie as possible. In fact, you know what? I wasn't actually going to watch this trailer. I mean, I'm going to see the film anyway, and what if it had major spoilers in it? I think I could have mustered up the willpower to do it, but then people will be asking me what my thoughts on the trailer are, so I thought for the sake of my audience I should watch it. So it basically feels like an extended trailer of the first one we got. It's the same overall template, much of the same scenes are shown, like Dickie and his father talking in prison, just with a bit more detail and extra scenes thrown in for good measure. It's a decent trailer. It looks like it isn't going to be overly plot heavy, the movie, and more focused on the characters and their arcs, much like The Sopranos. But I guess in order to attract a more mainstream crowd, the trailer's creators have shown as much shooting, explosions and crash bang wallop as possible. I can't say I'm a fan of the music used in the trailer. Sure, it's offbeat and quirky, but I just kind of found it annoying and thought it was an odd fit. I think the more we're seeing of this film, the more fans are warming up to the casting choices. Michael Gandolfini as Tony Soprano has gotten some stick, mainly due to his inexperience and the obvious comparisons to his father that his performance will generate. But from glimpses we see of him in both trailers, he looks great. He really looks like a young Tony Soprano. He sounds like a young Tony Soprano, like that part in the trailer where he says, "I'm always getting accused." And most importantly, you can envision this character organically growing up to look like the Tony Soprano we all know and love, not least because of the obvious genetic advantages Michael has. Casting James's son as Tony looks like it's going to come off as a genius wildcard casting decision. A lot of the other cast look great also. Vera Farmiga as a young Olivia is an absolute brilliant casting choice, and she looks like she's absolutely nailed it. The guys playing young Silvio and young Paulie also look like they've nailed the mannerisms necessary to make us think they're playing who they're playing. And hopefully when watching the film, it'll be a case of it taking a few minutes to get used to seeing these younger versions of classic characters, and then we can simply enjoy the story. Some of the more eye-raising casting decisions, like Big Pussy looking like a Puerto Rican, will stick out when watching a trailer, but as mentioned, hopefully it won't be a big deal when watching the film. My only complaint with the casting at this stage, and it's not so much a complaint as it is an observation, is that in The Sopranos, the actors look like people you might see browsing in your local shopping centre or pulling up next to you at the lights. With these two trailers, I can't quite shake the sense that we're seeing big-time Hollywood actors in wigs and makeup. It feels less authentic, but again, hopefully it won't be an issue when watching the movie. I've noticed there seems to be some confusion with Silvio's character. Some people thought I might have gotten it wrong that John Magaro was playing him because he's practically bald in the first trailer. We see him bald here too, but there's shots where he has the classic Silvio hair. So it seems like it definitely will be a case where Silvio wears a hairpiece, meaning the hair we see in The Sopranos that Steven Van Zandt Silvio wears has been fake the whole time. I guess some might find that to be an unnecessary and irritating retcon, but in a way it's a clever Easter egg given how Van Zandt really was wearing a hairpiece throughout The Sopranos, as he's pretty much bald in real life too. The age of the characters, how old and young they look, and how the timeline relates to the aging of Tony Soprano seems to have everyone confused. We do know the movie will jump in timeline, but even then, we see shots of a grown-up Pussy, and in another shot an adult-looking Silvio with Dickie Moltisanti and whatnot, at a time where you'd think Tony would be played by Gandolfini as a teen. And Christopher is introduced as a baby, where Tony's clearly a teenager, when Christopher says in The Sopranos, if I remember correctly, that there's an 8-year gap between them. So what gives? Well, maybe it will turn out that the characters in The Sopranos were not all similar ages as we might have assumed. Maybe Silvio is about 10 years older than Tony, much like how Steven Van Zandt really was about 10 years older than James Gandolfini. The more I think about it, the more I can see Silvio and Pussy being a bit older than Tony. Paulie was obviously way older. And the new, much larger age gap between Chris and Tony? Well, maybe Chris just got it wrong in the show. And speaking of that baby scene, we see Chris cry and prompting the first of many ohs in his life that he'll cause. Maybe he cried because Tony tried to play got your nose with him. Won't be the last time, am I right, lads? But anyway, the old lady mentions that kids sometimes know things from the other side. An obviously heavy-handed nod to the fact that Tony kills Christopher in the end, and fans might roll their eyes at this fan service, fan baiting, lazy foreshadowing, whatever you want to call it, but from what we can gather from interviews with David Chase, there will be callbacks to The Sopranos, no doubt. It's something they couldn't resist doing, but he also said that the film wouldn't be overloaded with them, so I imagine this kind of scene isn't a common occurrence. And to be honest, I didn't mind. It was funny. And The Sopranos has never been just about mob wars and killing. Spirituality and the supernatural have always been a part of The Sopranos. And it's nice to see this being carried over into the movie. You need the text and the subtext. In other words, the sacred and the profane. I imagine that with Dickie and Tony's relationship being explored, it will add to Tony and Chris's in the show. There's a quick scene of Johnny Boy, Tony's father, praising Dickie, saying he stepped up and takes care of his family. But there's an animosity to the way he says it, like he's jealous or something. Maybe this is a clue to him actually taking out Dickie, knowledge which spurs Tony to take care of Chris because of guilt? Who knows? Or maybe, with the shots of Dickie and Livia at what appears to be a funeral, Johnny Boy dies, and this leads Dickie to take a bigger role in Tony's upbringing, moulding him into a gangster. Either way, Chris will be a big part of this movie, even if he isn't there physically, aside from being a baby. Many Sopranos fans already know that in some regard, Michael Imperioli as Christopher Moltisanti actually narrates the film. One thing we've been told by people who've already seen the film in early screenings is that the following line of dialogue is said by Chris in a voiceover. "The fat little kid is my uncle, Tony Soprano. Well, we call him my uncle, by marriage. He choked me to death." I think that could be quite cool, to be honest, and a little bit different to the usual narrations we get from gangster movies. You often get crime films that are narrated by a character who makes it to the end. Some films change it up, like Martin Scorsese's Casino's clever little thing where they kill the narrator while he's narrating. But in general, it can be a tired and lazy trope. But to have a prequel movie narrated by a dead guy who's killed by one of the main characters in the movie, now you've got something interesting to play with. Aside from that, one of the other key pieces of the news from the movie is that it will be surprisingly under 2 hours, and this apparently is a conscious decision from David Chase to keep the fans wanting more. And we might actually get more because, as I mentioned in a previous video, Chase insinuated that there might actually be more Sopranos movies in the works if this one is a success. In fact, literally as I was making this video, I became aware of the fact that Terence Winter, one of the original writers of The Sopranos and also the writer of The Wolf of Wall Street and the creator of Boardwalk Empire, was asked about David Chase, saying he's interested in doing another Sopranos movie if Terence Winter was involved. Chase originally said, "There's only one way that I would do it, and that was if Terry and I could write the script together. That I would do. A sequel to this movie you saw. In other words, what happens after this movie's over, before the TV show starts. With Tony in his 20s, that would be interesting to do, and there's a lot of stories that exist already because of the mythology, and working with Terry would be great. He and I in that world again, I think we'd have a good time. I wouldn't do it on my own, and I would not do it with anybody else. If Warner's wanted it, they own it, they can do whatever they want." And Winter responded to reporters when they reached out to him, saying, "The idea of doing another one and doing it with David, I'd be in a heartbeat, absolutely. That is very flattering." Winter said he has actually seen the movie and he also shared his thoughts. "I absolutely loved the movie," he said, "and I've seen it a couple of times. I was really on the fence about whether David should even do it. Let's leave it alone. But the more he told me about his ideas, obviously it couldn't be in better hands than David and Alan Taylor. I knew it would be good, I just didn't know how much I was going to love it. To me, it felt like the show tonally, like it was the show, but not the show. It just felt light, tonally, like what we did. The cast was great, and Alessandro Nivola was just incredible. Seeing Michael Gandolfini, there were so many moments where he was his dad. Ray Liotta was great. There are so many Easter eggs that if you know what they are, you get rewarded for paying attention. And if you didn't catch them, that's okay. It works as a freestanding movie. David and I kicked around just how many stories there are that precede the TV series. And the idea of doing a sequel, if it comes to that, would be really great fun. And also the chance to work again with David, a dear friend and mentor. Just from that standpoint, it would be fantastic. For more Sopranos and Many Saints videos, please consider subscribing to the channel, and thanks for watching.